And three, two, and one. Welcome back to the second episode of the Workshop Weekly podcast. Today is November 7th, and we are joined here by our first ever guest on the show, Tatyana.
Hello.
Tatyana has been helping us out with a lot of art projects here around the shop, and we've been doing a lot of epoxy pours and things like that. So we figured we'd bring her on today to talk a little bit more about what we've been doing.
We've been working on a lot of exciting stuff over the past week, a lot of new projects, and we've been working on getting all of our processes figured out. So I think we're going to talk a little bit first about what those processes are and about how we've been putting together the things that we've been putting together. So I guess I'll start by talking about the 3D printer, because that's a little bit of my specialty. So the way that 3D printing works, for those of you that don't know, is in order to print out an object, you first need to build a 3D model of said object. This is my specific area of specialty. This is exactly what I went to school to do. When I was in school studying, I was looking at doing a little bit different of an application than 3D printing, but the skill set's exactly the same. So the main program that I use for my 3D modeling is called Blender. Blender's a great open source 3D modeling program. When I was going to school, I initially learned using Autodesk Maya, which is, top of the line industry software, and it's really robust. It's also very expensive, which is why I was looking for something that's open source. So I got into Blender, and I've only been playing with Blender for the last couple months since we got the shop set up, but I'm really enjoying it. It's got all the tools that I need. It works just as well, if not better, than Maya in most instances, and yeah, I've been really happy with it. So once you go into Blender and build out your 3D model, then it gets transferred to Creality Slicer as our secondary program. So once we have the 3D model all mocked up, then we move it into the Creality Slicer, and that preps the file for the 3D printer. From there, it gets put onto an SD card. We plug that into our 3D printer, and we're ready to go.
Yeah, so I'd also like to touch on the 3D printing a little too. So for anyone who has been thinking about getting a 3D printer but hasn't really done any 3D design themselves, don't let that intimidate you. There's a lot of open source files out there on the internet that other people have designed and allow you to just download the file, put it on an SD card, plug it into your printer, and print it out. So this week earlier, I was filming a few videos working on the Resin Room, getting ready for our epoxy pours. And I didn't have a phone mount for my phone. So I was like, okay, I'm going to see if I had 3D print one. But obviously, I don't know how to 3D model. Dillon wasn't here. So I just went online, open sourced a file, found a nice little 3D or a nice little phone mount that goes into a GoPro mount on a tripod. And I had plenty of GoPro mounts around. So I was able to 3D print myself a mount without doing any 3D design work. And that was pretty cool, able to do that. Dillon's against downloading designs. He's I can do it myself. I'm going to do it myself person. But yeah, and then we'll talk a little bit about the laser engraver that we've been using. So this thing's been pretty cool. We've been using it for a lot of wood projects to start out with. So basically, we've been trying to use a lot of reclaimed barn wood and things like that. Basically, the engraver we have now is capable of cutting up to a 3mm piece of plywood. We were doing that, and in order to get it to cut through the plywood, we had to do probably 4 or 5 passes on the plywood to get it to burn all the way through. And that was really burning the edges of the wood and starting to fan out, so you couldn't really be able to see your design if it had high detail. So then I noticed on the laser engraver software there was a spot for air assist. So I looked into that a little bit, and basically it was pretty easy. I just ended up rigging up an airline, running it at about 10 psi. Actually, no, it's not even 10 psi. It's running at like 1 psi. So I've got an airline running off our compressor, and I just run our compressor down at the lowest setting on the regulator. And then we have the airline zip tied onto our laser, what's that thing called? Our laser module, I guess. The actual module that runs on the gantry. So it is aiming right where the laser's aiming, and it's just blowing just a light bit of air. It's able to get a more concentrated burn, and it only burns where the laser is actually focused, and it doesn't burn around the wood in that area. So it comes out with a lot cleaner images. So it's been really cool getting to learn all the hardware, and Yeah, Dillon's just doing the software side of things, and I've been doing the hardware, keeping the machines rolling and getting them ready to go. So by the time he gets here during the day, we load up some files that he made and create some cool shit.
Yeah, having the air assist set up on the laser engraver has made a night and day difference. We were not getting very clean, very clear lines out of our designs before. And once we set that up, it like I said, it's just night and day. And that I'm really enjoying that as kind of the artist on the project, seeing my everything come out cleanly like it's supposed to. That's been really exciting. I guess I could talk a little bit about the software we've been using for the laser engraver and a bit about how that process works. Again, we're using everything open source right now. All open source software, anything that we can find that we don't have to pay for, is right up our alley. So to that end, we found some open source image editing softwares. One is Pixlr, which is actually developed by Google, and it's basically has all the same tools as Photoshop. Works almost as well as Photoshop. I would say Photoshop definitely still has some advantages over Pixlr, rather. Pixlr has been able to do everything that I've needed to do, so I haven't had too many issues with that transition. And like I said, that's developed by Google, and it actually runs in your web browser. So you don't have to download any software, you don't have to do anything for that. You just log on to it, open up some files, and you can start editing. The other program that I've been using is called Inkscape. Inkscape is a vector based image editing software. It's essentially, if Pixlr is to Photoshop, then Inkscape is to InDesign. And for those of you who don't know, Pixlr and Photoshop, they create bitmap images. That's pixel images. And so the images are made up of individual pixels, and they don't always scale very well. That's why if you have like a photograph and you try and blow it up really big or shrink it down really small, you can lose a lot of detail because the pixels are distorting, and there's less pixels and they're trying to catch all the detail, but there's not as much information there for the pixels to display. So anyways, it gets kind of messy when you're scaling bitmap images. With vector-based images, there's a mathematical equation saved in the computer that is drawing the shape of the lines and the shapes in your vector-based image, which makes scaling it work much better. You can scale infinitely up, you can scale infinitely down without losing any quality. So those are the two images, or the two softwares that we're using to generate images that we're then outputting to the laser engraver. And then the third piece of software that we need for that is called Lightburn, which is the software that interfaces with our lasers. So that allows us to bring in our designs, import them into Lightburn, and then that's what sends the information over to the laser engraver. And we're able to set up all of our settings with how many passes we want the laser to make, if we're trying to get a deep cut, or if we're trying to cut all the way through something, or how fast we want it to go, and what power we want the laser to cut at. And so we kind of get all of those settings worked out in Lightburn, and then send the image over to the laser engraver, and it cuts it into the wood.
Yeah, so it's been really cool getting to mess around with these over the last few days and kind of get all the hardware tuned in and get our skills tuned in with the software so we're able to run efficiently.
So that's a little bit of our process. That's kind of what we've been doing so far, about how we've been generating the images and the files and the 3D models that we need to run the laser engraver and the 3D printer. And we just wanted to kind of give you guys a little bit of background on that so you kind of understand what the workflow is, what our process is. And so when you see projects that we're going to be doing videos on in the future, you'll have a little bit better of an idea of what goes into those. So with all that being covered, I think we can start and talk about some of the actual projects that we've done so far this week. And Tatyana, that's what you're here to talk about, because you've been doing a lot of the creative end of things on that and coming up with a lot of hands-on type designs, right? Because we've talked a lot about how we are generating designs digitally and how we're transferring those into the real world with the 3D printer and the laser engraver, but you've been using a lot more found objects in the epoxy project. So maybe you can talk a little bit about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, I'm not technologically inclined or anything, so I don't do like I don't understand how the machines work. But I um have been doing a little bit of painting. I'm super excited about our resin projects. I did one this week, kind of like a fall leaf piece, which turned out really nice. Just super basic, just painted a board, glued some leaves down. And then the guys came in and helped me pour resin over the top, and it turned out really beautiful. Um, so it's been super fun to
Yeah.
have an opportunity to create again.
It was really cool to see you make that art piece too, because you made the board, you put all the leaves down, and you're just like, I
I
hate
didn't
it.
like it.
I hate it.
I didn't like it when
And
it was
then
done.
me and Dillon came in there and looked at it and we're like, oh, that thing's sick. We could do something sick with this. So we ended up taking it's a little like furring strip material. We had a little 1 by material, and we cut it down to the size of a frame and painted it gold. Then we ended up tacking it onto the side to leave about a quarter of an inch above the plywood that we ended up going through. We caulked all the seams so we wouldn't lose any resin. We learned that last week the hard way. Lost a lot of resin doing a few pours, but hey, that's what you do. You live and you learn. And so far, so good. I mean, we're getting there. We're getting things done.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm having fun painting again. I really am excited about the idea of combining 3D printing, resin, and well, I guess those two right now.
Yeah.
As far as like the anchor that you made, where you did a 3D, what would you call that? Like base, like
Like
mold.
Yeah, like a mold.
Like a 3D printed mold, and then you poured resin inside of it. It was an anchor, and you did the gold pour inside, and it makes a super beautiful pendant, like anything. So I feel like the possibilities are endless there when it comes to jewelry or keychains. I really want to make those, like, what do you call those? The hanging things,
Yeah.
like light catchers.
Oh, like dream catchers?
Yeah, like dream catchers, light
Kinda.
catchers.
Yeah.
Yeah, like wind.
Do you know what I'm
they're
talking
like,
about?
Kinda like wind chimes.
Kind
but
of.
Like,
Yeah,
they're
but not
just
but
like,
not
they're just
wind
like
chimes.
just the kind of charms that are
Yeah,
just
like hanging
yeah.
charms, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And yeah, that's what's been really cool watching you just find all these natural materials.
Yeah,
Just-
that's the other thing. And I really appreciate that aspect of how you guys work, using reclaimed material and repurposed, and I mean literally just stuff that we're finding around the property that we can just turn into something really awesome. Um, and for me, I really like going just out in nature and finding leaves and flowers and finding a way to preserve them, which is why I'm super excited about resin pours.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
chilling. I'm just making stuff,
Yeah.
and it's pretty fun.
That's what your club's all about. It's about making stuff and having a good time. And hopefully some of that stuff is cool and maybe somebody will want to buy it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I don't know what it's all gonna be yet, but now's the time to just
Yeah.
create things and see
Yeah.
what comes out
Mhm.
of it. So
It's just we've made so much stuff in the last week, and I know Tatyana mentioned it, but I'm really excited to be back in a creative space. Also, I went to art school, but I graduated in 2015. Yeah, 2015. So it's been a good 5 years since I was in art school and like around creative people consistently, and just around all the creative people and being able to bounce artistic ideas off of. And for any of you that are artists, you know that talking to another artist is a completely different conversation than just talking to somebody who's like, "Oh, check out my art." Like, and they, unless you're like, it's a different conversation when you're talking to
Yeah.
a trained artist because
Mhm.
they know what they're looking at and how to give feedback and how to give critique and how to collaborate ideas off of each other. So that's been a lot of fun working with you, Tatyana, on that kind of stuff in the last week.
Yeah. The collab is fun.
Yeah, the collab's a lot of fun. And yeah, like Tatyana was saying, the last week worth of projects has been mostly resin projects, and that's been a lot of fun. That's a completely new medium for me. That's something I've never worked with before, and I'm just exploring different ways that I can apply it to projects. So, like Tatyana was saying, I made an anchor I 3D printed a mold. I did a 3D model, printed the mold out, and just poured epoxy straight into the mold. And I really liked the look that came out with because the filament that we're running in the 3D printer right now is a black filament. So you had this black border, and then I filled it up with gold epoxy up to the rim. So you have this gold anchor shape with like a black border that's around it. And I really like the way that that came out, and I feel like there's a lot of applications for that. The one that I did was pretty big, but if I scaled it down a little bit, it could definitely be a necklace pendant. If I scaled it down further, it could be an earring. And there's all kinds of designs that could be done with that. I made just an anchor to begin with, but I've also been playing around a lot with zodiac signs as designs. I've been doing a lot of stuff with that in like the last week. I tried to laser cut some zodiac shapes out of the 3mm plywood that we were talking about. We're still trying to get that dialed in as far as exactly what laser settings we need to cut all the way through the plywood. So, and it's a lot of research and development. And these aren't necessarily always quick processes. Like I have an entire sheet of the 3mm plywood that I tried to cut a bunch of zodiac designs onto and hoping that it would cut all the way through. And it took multiple days. I think it was like 7 hours total of like cutting time. And then I picked the piece up off the laser engraver and it didn't cut all the way through. And just kind of lost. The piece of plywood's not really a big deal. It's the 7 hours that it took to laser engrave it. So, but that's fine. It's all, like we said, that's what right now is all about. Getting things dialed in, researching it, figuring out how it works. But yeah, I think with the air assist that we were talking about earlier, set up on the laser engraver, we should be able to get everything dialed in a lot more. And we've done a few. The other thing that I've been playing around with is trying to laser engrave deep enough into the wood that I can pour epoxy into it and then sand it down and level it so that you have an epoxy inlay in the wood. That's what I did with this Petaluma sign. You guys might have noticed last week that it was sitting here and it was just all black. I went and inlaid gold epoxy into it and then planed it down so that it was flush with the wood. Came out pretty not bad for my first run at it.
Yeah, we didn't have air assist on when we cut that one, so the cut
we didn't have
wasn't as
air
clean.
assist on, and I didn't have the laser focused correctly either. So the cut came out a little bit weird, which kind of affected the quality of the rest of the project. But again, we're learning, we're getting there. So, and it's been a lot of fun to experiment with it.
Yeah, and it's definitely cool. Like Tatyana and Dillon are super stoked about the art side of things, but I'm stoked about the practical side and actually applying these and building like functional vehicles and devices that we can use. Say we got the 2 go-karts in here that I think we're going to end up building probably within the next month. As long as things go as planned, I want to get those projects done pretty quick. One of them we're going to do a gasoline engine on, and the other one I think I'm going to do an electric motor on. And I think it's just going to be really cool once we do the electric motor setup. If I need to build bracketry or anything, or if I need to house any of the electrical components, we should be able to design just a box or a module to house all of our electronics and fit them perfectly, 3D print it, and get that all bolted up. And we should be able to make some really clean, customized projects out here using the tools that we have at our disposal right now. Do you want to talk about a little bit about the dream? I know we've talked about this before, what we want to really turn this into and how we want to fucking go ahead with the future of the actual workshop.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's really going to be a ramping up process. It's going to be a snowball process is what I'm really hoping for. That after this first year or two, we're just going to see exponential growth in the amount of projects that we're set up to work on, that we are capable of working on, and it's going to be really exciting. So we've been talking a lot about the art projects that we've got going on right now, and that's really where we're kind of starting. Our goal is to have our storefront open by January 1st. And in order to open a storefront, we need to have inventory that we can fill that storefront with, right? And so the easiest way to do that is by making crafts and like artistic type things that people can buy, right? So signage. We've been working on getting some coasters, some keychains, a lot of signs. Another thing that I want to transition into soon as we continue to scale up our projects, right? We're working on small scale projects right now, getting our techniques dialed in, but I'm starting to feel pretty good about some of those techniques. So some of the stuff that I immediately want to start snowballing into is larger scale projects like picnic benches and picnic tables and chairs and cabinetry and things like that people can buy. Again, mostly decorative, that they can put up in their house, but that we can apply all of these skills that we're learning, right? We can get some epoxy inlays in there. We can get some laser burns onto some of these things. and just come up with enough stuff to fill our storefront. That should hopefully make us a couple bucks, and we can keep this thing rolling, and then we can just keep scaling projects up. Right now we're making coasters and signs, and like I said, hopefully soon we'll be scaled into tables and chairs, and then just keep scaling up into bigger projects after that.
Yeah.
Custom.
And yeah, you mentioned making like custom tables and things,
Yeah.
and that's what I wanted to do with actually the sign or the what would you call it, babe? It's not a painting because I was about to call it a painting, but now it's not a painting. It's an epoxy pour. The art piece. The leaf piece.
Thing.
The piece of leaves.
I haven't even named it.
Yeah, you're gonna have to come up with a title for it.
Yeah. The falling.
Yeah, pockets full of posies. Okay, I think that's what it should be called. It's pockets full of posies.
Wasn't that from like a disease?
Like some dark context to that or something. Like has to do with the plague or
or something.
Yeah. Call it the fall of the empire.
Yeah.
So
There you go.
there we go. So yeah, basically, we got this really cool just art piece that Tatyana made, and I was like, wow, that would make a really cool just epoxy table in like a van or a mobile tiny house or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another thing that I want to really apply all these art projects to, that I want to have. If anyone has a van that they want to build out, give me a call. I'm looking to build out a van sometime in the next year, and that'll be a really cool project to allow Tatyana to really get creative on the artsy side and just build some cool components that we put into the van, make that thing look nice, make everything function well. And that will be a really fun collaborative project for all of us to work on together.
It'll be exciting. Like I said, it's just all about continuing to scale up into new projects. So a lot of what Tyler's talking about, what Tyler's background is in automotive. Some of you may know this. Anybody who's didn't know us before the podcast doesn't know this. But Tyler actually built out an entire tiny home on his own. His background is in auto mechanic work. And so we really want to incorporate those skills into projects that we're doing in the future also. And obviously those are much bigger projects, so it's all about scaling up into them like I was talking about. But yeah, he mentioned the go-karts that we have, so hopefully we'll be able to build those out in the next month or so, and that'll get a little bit of our auto mechanic skills in there. I'll have to learn a little bit of Tyler's trade.
But yeah, I
once we
figured
start working on that.
Yeah, so that will be a good like chance to take the things, work out the kinks before we're putting like fenders on cars or something like that. Before we're going down the road building things for building things are going to be going down the highway on the outside of a vehicle. We'll be putting them on a go-kart first, making sure that our processes actually work right and function well. And right now, yeah, it's about working out the kinks, getting all the R&D done. And yeah, as Dillon was saying, I have a background in automotive repair. So, I mean, I've done everything from tearing down engines to pulling interiors out of vehicles. I used to work at a luxury car dealership. So, I mean, I'd be cutting windshields out of $250,000 cars. And that's what I did every day for 4 years. So I really enjoy working on vehicles and just using my hands. And I'm really looking to build out some cool vehicles at this workshop.
Yeah, and that's really what the workshop's all about. We're not here to make any one specific thing. We have two guiding principles for the workshop. And that is, we want to be able to make anything we want and anything that anybody could ask us for. And we want to be able to make it as customizable as possible. We want to be able to build anything and deliver it exactly how you want it. And when we say anything, we mean anything. Like I said, It could be something as simple as some jewelry or a custom art piece or a sign that you want up to your house or
a rocket to Mars. If you got the budget, we'll fucking go for it.
Yeah, all the way up to furniture, picnic tables, and even further than that up to
I'd love to build a tiny house.
Yeah.
If anyone would like me to build a tiny house or a van, I would really love to do that again now with the experience that I have after building the first tiny house. I'd really love to build a van out. I've gotten a lot more experience in all the aspects of carpentry and everything. And then with the tools that we are starting to put together in the shop here, I just can't wait till the next project I have to allow myself to just be creative. Like, I'm creative in a whole nother way than you guys are creative. Like, I like to create on like a functional, it's definitely a different type of thing, but I just like to build.
Yeah,
functionally creative.
Yeah.
He's very. That's actually a good way to put it. He's very
Yeah.
functionally creative.
Yeah, like you walk over to our garbage can and step on a piece of wood and it opens because I didn't want to open it every time I walked up to it.
Yeah.
That's the creative I am.
Uh-huh. And all of these projects that we're hoping to scale into in the future all work with the pipelines and the procedures that we're putting together now, right? Because all of the skills that we're using for our art pieces, yeah, they're simple laser engraving, simple 3D designs. But once we're customizing vans and once we're customizing tiny houses for people, we can go into the 3D applications, we can go into the 2D applications, we can mock up designs for them, we can do drawings, we can do 3D designs, we can make things modular in the digital space so that they're just different pieces that we can mix and match and put together and, again, retain that level of customization that we're hoping for. And so, yeah, just tying everything together, getting the processes working and flowing, and then tying everything together and being able to apply these processes to bigger and bigger and bigger projects over the next year, 2 years, 5 years is really what we're about.
Yeah.
And I'm really excited for
Yeah,
it.
I'm
really excited for it.
I'm stoked with the way things have been coming together so far because even just the few like little things we've been building every week, there's some of the coolest shit I've built in my life. Like that,
Oh, me too.
Yeah.
Some of the some of the best art pieces. I went to art school for 4 years. And I don't think I made anything as cool as what I've made in the last month of working on projects down here at the workshop.
Yeah.
And just some of the drawings and stuff that I've been working on, I'm like, wow, that's actually really good. Like,
It's been really good getting all these processes together too. Like Dillon was saying, right now we're in the stage of just learning how to use the software, how to use the hardware that we have, and just getting really those techniques dialed in. So that way when we're doing them in van builds and everything, it's just boom, we go to it and it's a second nature. We could go in there and we can get the build done exactly the way we want it without having to fidget with the machinery, without having to mess with the hardware, without having to mess with a laser engraver or anything. But yeah, we're getting there. We're getting things dialed in, getting processes dialed in.
yeah, and another thing that I'm really excited about, that I've been learning about the process so far, is how versatile our designs are, right? So, for example, this past week, I've been working on some designs where I've been drawing up some big cat faces, right? So I drew up, I think it was a tiger, a lion, a cheetah, and a leopard. It's just 4 drawings that I did. I did them digitally in Inkscape, vector-based drawings. I think it took me 2 days to put all 4 of them together. But we have almost a half a dozen products that we can put together just from those 4 designs, right? Because they can be applied to any of the tools that we have here. So I can take those designs and I can laser engrave them onto a piece of wood and just leave them as a laser engraving. I could laser engrave them into a piece of wood a little deeper. I could pour epoxy into them and then have a completely different piece out of that. I could take them and transfer them into 3D, and I could build some molds out of them like I did with that anchor project, pour epoxy into those, and now that's another product that we have. I could take them and print them out as like flat images in 3D and cast them into epoxy to make coasters or little signs like we've been doing with the astrological symbols. And so just right there, off of these couple drawings that I did, we've got a ton of products that we can make. And so that's really exciting too, just being able to get so much bang for your buck. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, filament's pretty cheap.
Yeah.
It seems so far. I mean, what did we pay for that big roll of black filament?
I think it was like $20 or $25 or something.
And we've been using it for like 2 months.
It's a 5-pound roll, yeah.
Yeah. So we're talking pennies every time we fire up that 3D printer.
Yeah, unless we're printing something that's going to take full couple days to print, it's just pennies on the dollar for the amount of filament it uses. And that's also an expense that's going to be going down the more and more 3D printing becomes widely spread and widely available. It'll be more mass produced, and I've already seen prices going down around like $15 for a 2.5 kilogram roll, which is a 5-pound roll, which is really cheap. You'll be able to produce a lot of parts out of that.
Yeah, I mean, so our 3D printer bed is 8.5 inches by 8.5 inches by 9.5 inches high. That's the working space that we have for our 3D printer, roughly. And so a lot of the things that we've printed out so far are pretty small, right? Like they're the size of maybe a coaster or something small like this, and maybe a little bit a couple inches high, a couple inches wide. And they're coming out at like a couple grams. We're using a couple grams of filament per print, and we have a 5-pound roll. So it's just, yeah, it goes a long way.
Yeah, definitely. That's something where we can add a customized touch, and it doesn't cost a lot to do it. It's nice.
Mm-hmm.
It's really cool how light, but how strong it is.
Yeah,
It
true.
definitely.
Yeah.
That's what I'm really stoked about is to once we start testing in like automotive applications. Like when I build the Taurus out, one thing that I'm probably looking forward to using this for is I want to build like a snorkel and kind of an air box for the side going up the side of the car. And I feel like we could build a pretty cool airbox top for that and have it kind of match up with the body lines of the vehicle so it fits really smooth. And I want to see really what kind of force this like material is able to hold up to because I've seen tests. It holds up decent in the sun, holds up decent under load. Heat is one where spot you'll have an issue because it is it's thermoform. Yeah, so it's like you heat it up to form it.
Yeah.
I'm going to talk a little bit about how a 3D printer works for anyone who doesn't even know. Like, if you have just been like, okay, what the fuck is a 3D printer? I have no idea what these guys are talking about. Like,
Yeah, okay, yeah, that's fair.
So, basically, a 3D printer, your consumable PLA is the most common material, which is just a plastic that's used for the prints. And basically, you'll have a roll of PLA, which is just like a roll of twine. It's a plastic just string on a roll. And then that is loaded on the printer. And you have an extruder nozzle. The nozzle runs on 3 axes. So you're able to create 3D models, X, Y, Z. So it goes left, right, and back, forth, up, and down. So this nozzle basically heats up to around 200 degrees. And then the plastic is fed through the nozzle and melts it down as it moves and forms the shape of what you're printing. So it'll print it layer by layer. It'll print the bottom layer first. And then move the nozzle up. I think what is it? We're working on a 0.15 millimeter basis, or I think we're able to go down to 0.1 millimeters in layer height on our printer. So that gives us an actual really clean print. It just takes a long time to do it. So the smaller layer height you have, the longer it's going to take to do the print. But basically, it's just an extruder that heats up this plastic hot enough to melt it, and then puts it down on planes one layer at a time until it comes out with the object that you had 3D modeled or 3D designed.
Yeah, and for anybody who's really curious about some of these processes, we are going to be making project videos soon. It's not just always going to be us sitting here in the office talking.
Yeah.
We're going to be making some project videos and stuff. We're going to make a shop tour video soon. We're going to get you guys in here so you can really see what we're working on and how we're working on it and really how all this stuff comes together instead of just listening to us talk about it.
Yeah, so tomorrow I'll actually be uploading our first video, but I'll be uploading our first YouTube video onto the workshop YouTube channel, and that'll be showing how we put together the resin room, and we'll have a few videos of us doing some resin pours and everything so you can see what we've been talking about and the projects we've been working on this last week.
Ooh, yeah, so let's talk about the resin room real quick because we've kind of skipped over that, I feel like. So here in the office, or here in the workshop, we have one small little sectioned off room. What's that room's 8 by 8? I think, something like that. And we hadn't really used it for anything yet. It's filled a couple different purposes so far. I mean, at one point it was a wood storage room. We talked about having it as our shipping and receiving room because it has a door that goes to outside or like having it so that people could drop packages in there when we get things delivered. But what we wound up doing this last week, actually what Tyler wound up doing, I didn't even know about it. He surprised me with it. I missed one afternoon at the workshop, came in the next day and was like, yo, what do we got going on in here? Anyway, so this little 8x8 room has been converted into what we're calling the resin room. And that's the room where we're going to be doing all of our epoxy pours. And I'm really excited about that because now we have a dedicated counter space to pour epoxy on, which pouring epoxy is really messy. So it's nice to be sectioned off into our own little space where that is going on. And it's also nice because it's a little 8x8 room, like I was saying, and we can temperature control it in there. And that's really important for pouring epoxy. And that was something we didn't really have when we were doing our first few pours. And I think it did affect our results a little bit. Essentially, if you have the resin room, essentially we're going to be looking to keep at around 75 to 77 degrees at all time. That's the temperature that you're supposed to store the epoxy resin at. That's the temperature that you're supposed to let the epoxy resin cure at. It's just the temperature that the epoxy resin likes to be at. And so, yeah, I'm really excited about getting that set up, and it really feels like we can, start doing things right.
Yeah, so basically before we were going in and blowing off all the dust off the wood shop workbench, and we would lay down some paper on the workbench in the wood shop and then do our epoxy pours there, and then it's like, okay, for the next 2 days, don't use any of the wood shop tools because we don't want dust in here. So basically last week I was like, okay, this needs to change. So I decided, okay, yeah, that little room in the back, as Dillon was saying, I'm going to turn that into our resin room. And I basically, me and Dillon had talked about, okay, if we're doing an epoxy pour room, what are the essential things we want? We want to be able to temperature control it, we want to be able to dust control it, and we want to be able to have a clean work surface and a space to just be dedicated to only epoxy. So basically, I set up a table on the one wall and tried to make that as level as I possibly could, so that way when we're doing pours, we don't need to worry about bracing things up, and just everything should stay flush and level. And then I went in there, I actually bought a door sweep for the bottom of the door, but it turns out our door has like a millimeter of clearance below it, so the door sweep wouldn't fit on the door. We had about a 1/2 inch gap leading to the outside, so that was just, we have a road right there where it's just kicking up dust constantly, and I had to do something about that. So I ended up just screwing the door sweep onto the door sill on the bottom, and it sweeps the bottom of the door and it closes perfect. So now we got an airtight fit in there. We've got it temperature controlled, and eventually we may run like a positive pressure. So we run a filtered air going in, so that way no dust can get in from the workshop. When you open that door, it'll be blowing air out constantly. So that'll be something we look to in the future when we're getting everything completely set up. But for now, the resin room is a much better spot to pour epoxy than we were working with a week ago.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I think that's pretty much what we've been up to for just last week.
Mm-hmm.
Which, now that we've sat here and talked about it, we did a lot of stuff in the last week.
Yeah.
It's been really exciting, and it feels so good to have everything just really starting to take off. We've been here, like we said, for about 3 months, and a lot of that time was set up and getting things in place, getting things the way that they needed to be, and so it feels really good to be making that transition into production. You know what I mean? And obviously everything's not perfect. There's still some things that need to be set up and still some work to be done in that front, but it just feels good to be producing.
It's really fun.
Yeah, definitely. And it's nice to finally see, I have a pile of projects, like a list of projects, fucking longer than, I don't know.
It's your favorite thing.
I have a lot of projects, and it's nice to just see this space come together because I'm just slowly starting to chip away at them, and just, I was able to finally bring my car in last week, get it worked on. I have somewhere to do that's clean. And then we have all these tools just coming together and just ready to build and ready to create whatever we can dream up. So it's been a really cool process watching it all come together, and we built a lot of stuff over the last few weeks. We're gonna build a whole lot more. And I've never even had a piece of concrete to work on a vehicle.
No.
Like, I have worked in the dirt. My the barn I used to work in was my grandpa's barn. We were staying at his property for a couple years, and it was just a dirt floor. Whenever I'd pull my car in to work on it, like, you can't take your car apart there because you're just going to fill your engine with dirt, fill everything with dirt. I had to pull the intake manifold off my Taurus the other day, and that's exposing the valves, exposing everything on your engine, and it felt really nice being able to do that in here where I know it's not going to get fucked up, and I can actually do the proper job the way I want to do it. So I've been really stoked about just having the shop alone and getting all these tools rolling and getting everything going. It's been surreal just seeing it actually functioning.
And having a space that's our own, that we set up, that's designed to do the things that we want it to do. It's real nice. It's something that I've always wanted also, you know what I mean? And so, yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
I think I'm about to run out of video on this camera here, so
yeah, I think I'm about to run out of stuff to talk about. So
yeah, me too. It's been a good hour. I'd like to thank Tatyana for being our first guest on the podcast.
Thank you so much for
our
having
podcast,
me
last week's podcast was like 25 minutes after editing, and we only had like 35 minutes
before we started.
Before editing. So we're almost we're double.
Yeah,
almost. So.
Yeah, so hopefully, hopefully people are still listening. You know, hopefully, we kept you entertained. And I appreciate anyone who is listening. And I hope you are as excited as we are for the projects that we have coming up. So thank you again. This is Workshop Podcast number 2. We are currently at 9 subscribers. Thank you to everyone who has subscribed so far. And we are out.
Yeah, and any of our viewers who have been watching along and haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and subscribe. Any new viewers, hit that subscribe. Share us with your friends.
Throw a like in there while you're at it,
A couple comments if you could. Yeah.
Helps out with the algorithm, helps us out, because the quicker this grows, the quicker we get rolling on more things, and the more cool shit we can build and more content we can bring to you.
Yeah, exactly. And if we get enough subscribers going, then maybe we can start doing some giveaways and stuff like that.
Yeah, I'm stoked for once we can actually have people like come to the shop and do things and start collaborating with other creators and things like that, and that'll be really cool.
Yeah, I'm really excited about that too. Like I mentioned, I know a lot of people. I went to art school. I still know a lot of people that I went to art school with that are really talented artists. Some of them that I haven't talked to in a while. So once we really get rolling, I want to start reaching out to people and seeing if we can get some collaborative stuff going on. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, if any of the people listening are those people, hit me up.
Yeah.
Let's do some collab.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if anyone wants us to build a van or a tiny house, hit us up. We got you. We'll build you some cool shit.
Yeah, that's what we're here for. Building cool shit.
Yeah. And we said it last time or two. We're going to build some cool shit in here.
We'll probably say it again.
Yeah. And over this last week, since we recorded that last podcast, we built some pretty cool shit.
Yeah. We just got to keep saying it until it becomes a meme. We can say, yeah.
That's going to be our fucking motto, is the workshop. We'll build you some cool shit.
Just t-shirts that say building cool shit.
Yeah.
All the merch.
Yeah. So yeah, until next time.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for listening, and we will see you next week on another episode of the Workshop Weekly Podcast.
Good night.
Good night.